All right, now I'm gonna include a clip here from Preacher, a minister that I quite like, and she's a kind of cool lady, and I really like this video that she made about forgiveness. Um, one of the things is when somebody does something wrong, maybe they try to make it up to you and you forgive them, but Prospero does something more. A lot of Shakespeare characters, they don't want forgiveness. They don't care about forgiveness. They're not going to forgive their enemies. They're going to fucking murder them all. And that's why so many Shakespeare plays end with a pile of dead bodies. And this looks like it could end the same way. Prospero gets all of his enemies in his power, and then he can just fucking murder them with a fireball or something. And he chooses not to. He chooses forgiveness. More complicatedly, this is a more advanced thing to talk about today. Um, he chooses to forgive people who don't deserve forgiveness. They're still bad people. Actually, when he talks to them, it's very clear that they don't even really feel bad for what they did. The king feels bad that he thinks his kid is dead, but like his brother who betrayed him, his brother doesn't apologize. His brother doesn't promise to live a better life. His brother doesn't seem improved or better. They're terrible people, and they don't really deserve forgiveness. And Prospero does something very, very radical in this play, which is that he chooses to forgive them anyway, even if they don't deserve it. A couple of things to think about here. A lot of people have heard the idea of turning the other cheek, which is a sort of Christian idea. Christianity is a religion that is supposed to care a lot about forgiveness. Some people have heard the phrase turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek, my students are a little unclear on what that means. They know that Jesus tells people, Jesus tells his followers, turn the other cheek. And usually what my students think it means is that if somebody hits you, you should turn away and walk away from them instead of fighting back. Because most people would try to punch back. If somebody punches you, you're going to punch them back. Jesus says, no, 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 turn the other cheek. Well, some of my students, if they even think about the phrase, or they know, none of my students know the phrase, but the ones that do often think they know that has something to do with nonviolence. And so they imagine that what it probably means is that if somebody strikes you, turn the other cheek. Just turn away and walk away and don't punch them back, because violence is. If you know Jesus' life, he was pretty against violence. But that's not what turn the other cheek does not mean. Walk away. It's a little disturbing to think about what turn the other cheek means, but it means that what Jesus says is that if someone strikes you across the cheek, Jesus tells you, turn the other cheek and let them hit you again. Most of my students consider that pretty upsetting, because if somebody hit them, they would hit back. They definitely would not. Most of my students, I think, most people would not turn the other cheek, meaning allow the person to keep hitting you. It seems like a crazy idea, but if you know anything about the life of Jesus, it's not real surprising, because Jesus, of course, he's tortured to death, and he goes willingly. Why does he do that? Because when you attack somebody, if you get attacked, you might attack back, at which point that person attacks you back. And then you got to attack them back because they attacked you. And then they got to attack you back because you attacked them. And then they got to attack you because you attacked them. And right, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is what creates violence in the world. And it never, ever stops. At some point, nobody even remembers who threw the first punch. It's just two people constantly getting revenge, and it never, ever stops. So Jesus has this idea that nonviolence, Martin Luther King too, nonviolence is the way to go. If you just stop attacking back, the person will stop attacking you, because they'll realize that the idea is to kind of break the cycle of violence. And so Jesus does that in this very radical way, where he allows himself to be captured and tortured and killed. And he does that. He says he forgives his enemies. He literally says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He asks God to forgive his enemies who are nailing him up to a piece of wood. But he wants forgiveness. Do they deserve forgiveness? Maybe not. But forgiveness is the only way to sort of stop the cycle of violence, in Jesus' opinion. This preacher that I'm going to put a clip of describes it in a really interesting way. She says, forgiveness, a lot of people think if somebody attacks you or does something terrible to you and you forgive them, people go, you must be a pussy. You must be weak. It's just so sad that this person, you're just letting them shit all over you and they're going to get away with it. This preacher points out something really interesting. She says, forgiveness is a kind of radical thing. Because if somebody does something terrible to you and you just can't stop thinking about how you're going to get your revenge, they're taking up real estate in your head. They are in your brain. You're thinking about them all the time. In some ways, you are chained to your enemies. Because if somebody attacks you and all you can do is think about getting them back and how you're going to get your revenge and what are you going to do to them, and you see how you're linked to them? It's like they're controlling your thoughts because you're thinking about them all the time. You should be thinking about something else, like books. That's what I like. But if you're interested in revenge, then you're thinking about them. They're taking up space. They're controlling you, and you're chained to them. You're chained to them. One thing forgiveness says, when you forgive somebody, one way of thinking about forgiveness is to say, you know what? This whole situation, I don't care anymore. I'm over it. I don't need you in my life anymore. As an enemy, or not as a friend, obviously, if they attack you, they're not friends anymore. But you don't need them in your life even as an enemy. You don't need them taking up real estate in your brain. It's a way of severing the connection with people who shouldn't be in your life. And radical forgiveness is a way of saying, you know what? I forgive you. I don't even care about this anymore. I don't want violence. I don't want anything to do with you. There's a famous Buddhist saying that when you are angry with someone, it's like carrying around a hot coal because you want to throw it at the person you hate. Well, if you're carrying around a hot coal, it's actually damaging you more than it's damaging them, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm so mad at that person, I'm going to get my revenge. They say it's a metaphor, right? That planning on getting revenge against someone else, being angry at someone else, is like carrying around a hot coal that you want to throw at them. It's a metaphor. What do these two things have in common? In both cases, you're doing more. Your anger is you think, I'm angry at this other person, I'm going to throw this hot coal at another person. But actually, the hot coal is burning your hand, and the anger is fucking you up. And it's a radical idea that you have to break that. You have to let it go. If you can drop the hot coal, if you cannot be angry anymore, because the person you're thinking, I'm gonna fuck this person up, I'm so mad at them. But those anger feelings, that's really just harming yourself and hurting yourself. And Prospero does something very radical in this scene at this moment, which is that he tries to create. He forgives his enemies. It frees him of them. And metaphorically, it frees him of this island. He's not like trapped on the island anymore. He's able to leave. It's again a kind of metaphor for his freedom. And it's really interesting if you think about Prospero's metaphor for Shakespeare, because because Shakespeare wrote so many plays where so many people wanted revenge, and those plays all end the same way: piles and piles of dead bodies. And it's interesting that in Shakespeare's last play, he says, let's forgive. Let's forgive him. Okay, cool. I have a couple of minutes left, and I forgot to say something. Remember in the earlier part when Prospero said that everything would dissolve? He said all the cloud-capped towers and everything would dissolve. This great globe would dissolve. He means that, just like things in the play disintegrated, he says that the earth will disintegrate too. But there's a metaphor in there. The globe was the name of Shakespeare's theater. It was a round theater, so they called it the Globe. So it's interesting that I remember telling you guys to always talk about author and audience. When he says this globe will dissolve, back in the day, you'd be sitting in a theater in the Globe Theater. And he says this globe too will dissolve. So the idea that life is like a play, that Shakespeare is like Prospero, is contained in that word globe, which means both the world and also the stage, is called the Globe. So Shakespeare's really thinking about his whole career here. He wrote plays like Othello, where everybody dies, and he doesn't want to write them anymore. He wants his play to end in forgiveness, not in violence. Why? Because he feels like the world is just like a play. It's going to dissolve, and none of this is going to matter anymore. So why not forgive people and be kind? Okay, that's the end of today. I will see you guys next time.